Bank refuses Black woman's loan. Then discovers she's the banker's daughter. Nia Ellison had always known she was destined for something great. The daughter of David Ellison, a well-known banking executive, Nia was well acquainted with the financial world from an early age. Yet, she had made a conscious decision to build her own path and never rely on her father's name or position to carve out her future. Her family's financial background had opened doors of opportunity, but Nia had resolutely stepped through those doors on her own terms, driven by her determination and her talents. Before we can continue, if you love your family, subscribe to this channel to help up creating amazing stories. Now, let's continue. Now, with an MBA from a prestigious business school, several internships, and 2 years at a consulting firm behind her, Nia felt ready to start her own business. She'd been nurturing the idea for years, working tirelessly to shape it into a viable enterprise. Her vision, an eco-friendly cosmetics company aimed at women of color. This was more than a business to her. It was a calling, a chance to provide what she had often struggled to find for herself: quality, ethically produced beauty products designed specifically for the diverse needs of women like her. Her plan was meticulous, with every step, expense, and projected outcome laid out in detail. Nia had spent countless hours refining her business model, seeking feedback, and making improvements. She had attended seminars, networked with industry professionals, and even saved a substantial amount of her own income to invest in her dream. But to make her vision a reality, she needed a bank loan. She had calculated that a moderate loan would be the last piece of the puzzle, allowing her to cover initial production and marketing costs. Confident that her credentials and preparation would make her an attractive candidate, Nia decided to approach a bank where she knew she could expect a professional and fair experience. On the morning of her appointment, Nia dressed in a crisp, tailored navy suit, hoping to project the confidence and professionalism she felt. As she slipped into her heels and reviewed her pitch one last time, she allowed herself a moment of anticipation. Today marked the first formal step toward launching her business, and she was ready to put her best foot forward. Arriving at Prestige National Bank, Nia took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm and composed. She walked through the sleek, glass doors and into the impressive lobby. The bank had an air of opulence, with polished floors and gleaming chrome fixtures that seemed to signal, "This is where success happens." Nia admired the architectural design, noting how it reminded her of her father's insights about creating trust through appearances. Subtle choices, how the lighting softened any harsh edges, how the ceiling arched upward to give the space an open, welcoming feel, were all intentional. It was the kind of environment her father would say was crafted to convey authority and stability. She made her way to the front desk, where a woman with a warm smile greeted her. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Henson in the loans department," Nia replied, returning the smile. The receptionist nodded, typing something quickly on her keyboard. "Of course. Just take a seat, and he'll be with you shortly." Nia took a seat near the bank's sprawling windows, where natural light flooded the room. She noticed the subtle chatter around her, clients in polished suits, financial advisors in quiet discussions, and the faint sounds of keyboards clicking from behind nearby desks. She felt a mixture of pride and nerves. Sitting here, in this environment, she felt she belonged. As she waited, she recalled the late nights she'd spent reviewing her financial projections, adjusting her marketing strategy, and refining the unique selling points of her product line. Each ingredient was carefully chosen, her pricing competitive yet sustainable, her brand story authentic. Her financial projections were conservative yet promising. The business was well thought out, and it was hers. Eventually, a young assistant appeared and guided her to a small, modern conference room with a broad, reflective table and plush chairs. She sat down, arranging her documents neatly and preparing for the meeting. After a few moments, Mr. Henson walked in, his gray suit impeccably pressed, his face expressionless. He was perhaps in his late 50s, his expression a practiced mask of professional neutrality. Nia noted how he barely glanced at her as he sat down across from her. "Good morning, Ms. Ellison," he said, his tone perfunctory as he opened her file, glancing at her application. I see you're applying for a business loan today. Yes, that's correct. I've prepared a full business plan and financial projections, Nia responded, her tone respectful but confident. Mr. Henson gave a short nod, flipping through her documents. I see, he muttered, barely glancing up. Could you briefly explain your business concept? She launched into her pitch, speaking clearly and passionately about her vision, her research, and the market demand she had identified. As she spoke, she noticed Mr. Henson's expression remained unchanged. He tapped a pen against the table, appearing more focused on his own thoughts than on her words. She had seen this kind of response before, people assuming her age or her appearance meant she couldn't possibly be serious. But she pressed on, detailing her business model, her target demographic, and her commitment to quality. When she finished, she looked at him expectantly, waiting for questions or feedback. Instead, Mr. Henson leaned back in his chair, closing her file with a small sigh. Ms. Ellison, I appreciate your presentation, but starting a business is quite a commitment, he began, his tone patronizing. It requires extensive experience, especially in such a competitive industry. Yes, I understand that, Nia replied calmly. I've spent the last few years building the skills I need, and I believe I'm ready. Mr. Henson's gaze drifted past her, as if dismissing her words. Well, I'll have to be candid with you. Our bank has certain guidelines when it comes to granting loans to new businesses, especially those with limited operating history. It can be very risky for the bank. Nia felt a pang of frustration but forced herself to stay composed. I've provided a detailed financial projection and plan to minimize that risk. I'm confident that with the capital, my business will be profitable within the first 2 years. He pursed his lips, flipping through the file again, his eyes barely pausing on each page. She realized with a sinking feeling that he hadn't really reviewed her application. She had seen this look before, a look that communicated assumptions he wasn't even aware he was making. Without addressing her qualifications or her business model, Mr. Henson offered a half-hearted explanation. I'm afraid we're unable to proceed with this application. It might be better to look at a smaller loan or consider options at a local credit union. The words stung. Nia couldn't help but wonder if his reaction would have been different if she were someone else. She took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. Thank you for your time, she said, standing up and gathering her things. She felt his eyes on her as she left the room, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her disappointment. Walking back through the lobby, Nia felt a sense of resolve harden within her. This wasn't the first time she'd faced unwarranted doubt, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But she was determined that it wouldn't be the end of her journey. As she stepped out into the busy street, the hum of the city felt strangely reassuring. She had worked too hard to let one rejection, however unjust, hold her back. And little did she know, this setback was about to open doors she never anticipated. Nia settled into the chair across from Mr. Henson, preparing to present her case. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of a nearby air conditioner. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a warm glow across the glass conference room table. She had her business plan neatly laid out in front of her, her folder organized and professional. Despite her nerves, she reminded herself that she belonged here. Her qualifications, her preparation, and her drive were all exactly what any serious loan applicant would bring to the table. This meeting was the culmination of months of planning, and she was ready to communicate her vision confidently. Mr. Henson sat across from her, his eyes already on her paperwork. Nia couldn't help but notice his stiff posture, the way he barely looked at her as he flipped through the pages of her proposal. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly groomed, his suit crisply tailored, giving him an air of gravitas. She was used to encountering people with the same calculated expression he wore, polished and professional, yet distant. But it was his subtle mannerisms, the quiet sigh, the tapping of his fingers, that hinted he had already made up his mind before the conversation even started. After a few moments of silence, Mr. Henson glanced up at her, his gaze cold and appraising. Ms. Ellison, he began, his voice devoid of warmth, I understand you're here to apply for a business loan. Nia nodded, her smile polite but firm. Yes, that's correct. I've prepared a full business plan and financial projections, she replied, hoping her tone conveyed both respect and confidence. Mr. Henson continued flipping through her documents, barely taking them in, as if skimming for keywords rather than absorbing the content she'd carefully crafted. Nia's anticipation began to give way to a sense of unease. She knew the strength of her proposal, yet she had the sinking feeling that it wouldn't be enough here. As he shuffled through the papers, he paused occasionally to read a line or two, but his lack of engagement was clear. "Could you tell me a little about your business?" he asked, his tone patronizing, as though he doubted she could even articulate her own idea. "Absolutely," Nia responded, forcing herself to maintain her composure. She launched into her presentation, explaining her eco-friendly cosmetics line designed for women of color. Her voice was steady, every word chosen to convey her passion and expertise. She detailed the research she'd conducted, the market gap she had identified, and the unique selling points of her products. She emphasized her commitment to ethical sourcing and quality, as well as her carefully calculated financial projections. This was her moment to convey the depth of her planning and the dedication she had poured into this venture. But as she spoke, she noticed Mr. Henson's eyes drifting past her, his gaze unfocused. He wasn't really listening. He was simply waiting for her to finish, so he could move on with whatever objections he had already prepared. She'd encountered this kind of passive dismissal before, and each time it stung a little more deeply. Still, she pressed on, hoping to win him over through sheer determination and a flawless presentation. When she finished, she looked at him expectantly, waiting for questions or feedback. Instead, Mr. Henson leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest as if preparing to deliver a lecture rather than engage in a conversation. "Well, Ms. Ellison, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, starting a business is not just about passion," he said, his tone carrying a hint of condescension. "It's about experience and knowing how to manage risks." The way he said it, with that small, dismissive smile, implied that he believed she lacked both. It was a subtle yet clear insinuation that he didn't take her seriously. The words felt like a slap in the face, but Nia remained composed, determined not to let her frustration show. She had anticipated questions about her experience, and she was prepared to address them. "I completely understand," she replied, her voice steady. "That's why I spent the last few years in corporate consulting, specifically in industries that overlap with the cosmetics market. I also have an MBA from Georgetown, and I completed a summer internship with a top beauty brand. I believe these experiences have equipped me with the skills and insight needed to make this business a success." Mr. Henson gave a non-committal nod, as if her credentials didn't quite meet the unspoken requirements he was looking for. Nia could see it in his eyes, a doubt he wouldn't articulate, a judgment that went beyond her resume. The unspoken but lingering question seemed to be, could a young Black woman really run a successful business in this industry? Without even acknowledging her qualifications, Mr. Henson moved on, flipping to another section of her proposal. "So, you're asking for a substantial loan amount here. Have you considered alternative funding options?" Nia had been expecting this question. "Yes, I have. I've already invested my own savings into this project, but to take it to the level I envision, I'll need additional capital. That's why I'm here." Mr. Henson raised an eyebrow, his expression doubtful. "I see," he said, with a faint sigh. "But starting a business, particularly in such a competitive industry, is inherently risky. Do you have a fallback plan if this venture doesn't succeed?" Nia clenched her teeth, feeling the sting of his words. It was as if he had already dismissed her chances of success, assuming failure before even fully hearing her out. "I've thoroughly analyzed the market and created conservative projections to ensure that the business remains profitable. I believe my model is sustainable even in less than ideal conditions." But it was clear that Mr. Henson wasn't convinced. He nodded absently, his eyes still drifting over her proposal as though searching for further faults or reasons to reject it. To Nia, it felt like he was deliberately looking for any excuse not to approve the loan. He finally closed the folder, his fingers tapping lightly on the table, an air of finality in his movements. "Ms. Ellison," he said, his voice carrying a practiced, measured tone, "It's not that I doubt your commitment. I simply think that it may be premature for you to take on such a large loan. Perhaps a smaller amount from a credit union would be a more suitable option." The suggestion was both disappointing and frustrating. Nia had gone through her options, considered them thoroughly, and determined that this loan was precisely what she needed. Yet here he was, suggesting something smaller and more suitable, as if he knew her situation better than she did. "Thank you for the advice," she said, her tone calm but strained. She knew that arguing would be futile. The decision had already been made, his mind closed. There was no point in pressing further, even though she knew she was right. As Nia rose to leave, she glanced back at Mr. Henson, who was already opening the next file on his desk, moving on to the next applicant without a second thought. The dismissal stung, not just because of the rejection, but because of the underlying biases she sensed in every dismissive look and half-hearted question. Walking through the bank's lobby again, she felt the weight of the rejection settle over her. She thought of the late nights she'd spent crafting this plan, the years of education and professional experience that she'd worked so hard for, only to be reduced to a risk in the eyes of a man who hadn't even tried to see her potential. Outside, the cool air hit her face, grounding her in the present moment. The city's familiar hum of cars and voices reminded her that this was just one chapter, not the end. She wouldn't let Mr. Henson's prejudice dictate her future. With a determined resolve, she headed home, ready to regroup and find a way forward, knowing that her success would be the best response to all those who doubted her. That evening, Robert Ellison sat at his large mahogany desk, surrounded by dimmed office lights, his brow furrowed as he sifted through the day's reports. As a high-ranking executive at the bank, his evenings were often spent in solitude, attending to last-minute tasks and scanning the day's updates. The office was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the elevator down the hall and the sound of his own steady breathing. It was in these quiet hours that Robert often found clarity, focusing on strategy, investments, and, of course, his passion for guiding the bank's ethical principles. For years, he had worked tirelessly to reach this position. As one of the few Black executives in a highly competitive industry, his journey had not been easy. He had endured his own share of prejudice and obstacles, but he'd risen above them, believing that his hard work and dedication would set a path for others to follow. And more than anything, he'd hoped his success would create a more equitable environment for his family, especially for Nia, his only daughter. Robert had raised Nia to be resilient and ambitious, much like himself. He remembered the countless hours they spent together when she was younger, her boundless curiosity and determination showing even then. She'd always had a spark, a drive to learn and grow, and he was endlessly proud of her accomplishments. So, when Nia called him that evening, he expected to hear her usual updates, perhaps some news about her startup or a small achievement that she'd worked hard for. Instead, he heard a tone in her voice he hadn't heard before, frustration and disappointment. "Dad, I went to apply for the loan today," she began, trying to keep her voice steady, but he could hear the hurt behind her words. Robert leaned back in his chair, concern etching across his face. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge of anticipation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Nia took a deep breath before continuing. "They didn't even give my proposal a chance, Dad. I mean, I could see it in his eyes, Mr. Henson's eyes. He didn't take me seriously from the start." Robert's heart sank. He knew this feeling all too well, having faced his share of dismissive glances and assumptions over the years. He had hoped that things would be different for Nia, that perhaps the barriers he'd broken would have smoothed her path. But listening to her now, he felt the familiar weight of injustice, and he realized that his influence within the bank might not have reached as far as he'd hoped. "Nia, tell me everything," he said, his voice gentle but firm. She recounted every detail of the meeting, from the way Mr. Henson had barely glanced at her business plan to the condescending advice he'd offered about credit unions. Her words painted a clear picture of the encounter, each sentence revealing the undercurrent of bias that had colored the entire meeting. Robert listened intently, his expression growing darker with each detail. By the time she finished, he was silent, his mind racing. He knew Mr. Henson well, had worked alongside him for years. Henson was efficient and competent but old-fashioned, often resistant to change. Robert had noticed subtle biases in Henson's interactions before, though he never directly confronted him. Part of being in his position, Robert had learned, was choosing battles carefully, addressing issues strategically rather than reactively. But this wasn't just any issue. This was his daughter, his family, and the values he'd spent his life upholding. "Thank you for telling me, Nia," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'm so proud of you, for everything you've accomplished. Don't let one person's small-mindedness make you doubt yourself. I'll take care of this." There was a brief pause on the other end, and Robert could hear the relief in Nia's voice as she replied, "Thank you, Dad. I just wanted them to see my work for what it is. I wanted to be judged fairly." "You deserve that and more," he said, his tone resolute. "And I promise you, they'll realize exactly what they overlooked." After ending the call, Robert sat in silence for a few moments, collecting his thoughts. A familiar feeling of anger simmered within him, but he knew better than to act on emotion alone. As a banker and a leader, he understood the importance of precision and composure, especially in moments of tension. This was an opportunity to address not only Henson's conduct, but the broader culture of bias that had, for too long, gone unchallenged within the institution. Early the next morning, Robert arrived at the bank before anyone else. He wanted to review every detail of Nia's application before he addressed Mr. Henson. He walked through the quiet corridors, the walls lined with portraits of past executives and founders. Each face represented a legacy, but Robert knew that many of those legacies were built on values that no longer had a place in today's world. He felt the weight of history pressing down on him, a reminder of how deeply rooted biases could be within institutions like this. In his office, he opened Nia's application and read through it thoroughly. Her proposal was meticulously crafted, each section reflecting the hard work she'd put into building her vision. From the financial projections to the market analysis, everything was presented clearly and professionally. It was evident that she'd done her homework, and he knew that her application was more than worthy of consideration. Robert felt a surge of pride as he read her words, recognizing her voice in each line. She was his daughter, yes, but she was also a talented entrepreneur with a brilliant idea. It pained him to think that someone would look at her and see anything less. After reviewing her application, he reached out to the HR department, requesting a copy of the official report on her loan application review. He wanted a comprehensive understanding of how Henson had evaluated Nia's proposal and whether there were any notes or comments that might shed light on his thought process. By the time Mr. Henson arrived, Robert was ready. He had requested a private meeting with Henson, framing it as a discussion about a sensitive client concern to avoid raising suspicion. As Henson entered the office, Robert could see the hint of surprise in his colleague's eyes. It wasn't often that the executive vice president called a private meeting. "Good morning, Robert," Henson greeted, his tone respectful but curious. "What can I help you with today?" Robert motioned for him to sit down, offering a polite nod. "Good morning, Henson. I wanted to discuss a recent loan application that was brought to my attention. I believe you handled it yesterday." Henson's brow furrowed slightly. "Of course. Which application would that be?" "Nia Ellison," Robert said, watching Henson's reaction carefully. He didn't miss the slight flicker in Henson's expression, the brief moment of recognition mixed with discomfort. "Yes, I remember Ms. Ellison's application," Henson replied, his tone guarded. "I reviewed it yesterday afternoon." Robert nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. "Tell me, Henson, what were your thoughts on her proposal? I'd like to understand your perspective on why her application was declined." Henson shifted in his seat, clearly uneasy. "Well, Robert, I reviewed her proposal thoroughly, and while it was certainly ambitious, I felt that it lacked certain elements of experience and stability. I suggested she might consider alternative funding options, ones more suited to her current stage." "Interesting," Robert replied, his tone calm but probing. "From what I could see, her application was meticulously detailed, with well-researched financial projections and a solid market analysis. In fact, It meets all the criteria we typically look for in a successful application. Henson's discomfort became more apparent as he tried to respond. Yes, but as you know, Robert, we also consider the applicant's experience in managing a business, especially in such a competitive market. Ms. Ellison is young, and starting a business requires more than just enthusiasm. Robert leaned forward, his gaze steady and unyielding. Let me clarify something, Henson. Ms. Ellison isn't just any applicant. She's my daughter. Henson's face went pale, the realization dawning on him in an instant. I wasn't aware of that, Robert, he stammered, visibly flustered. I assure you, my assessment was based purely on her application. I'm sure it was, Robert replied, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. And yet, I can't help but wonder if her application would have been treated differently had you known who she was. He let the words sink in, watching as Henson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Robert continued, This isn't just about my daughter, Henson. This is about the kind of environment we foster within this institution. If a qualified applicant like her can be dismissed so easily, simply because of someone's assumptions, then we're failing in our mission as a bank. Robert, I didn't intend, Henson began, but Robert held up a hand, cutting him off. Intentions don't change outcomes, Henson, he said firmly. We have a responsibility to treat every applicant with respect and fairness, regardless of their age, background, or connections. If we're going to maintain our reputation as an inclusive institution, then we need to address these biases directly. The weight of Robert's words hung heavily in the air, the silence filled with the unspoken understanding between them. Henson nodded, his face a mixture of remorse and embarrassment. You're right, Robert. I see now that I may have let my own assumptions cloud my judgment. Robert leaned back, his expression softening slightly. We're all human, Henson. But if we're going to lead by example, we need to be better than our biases. Let's make sure that from now on, every applicant receives the consideration they deserve. And as for Nia's application, I expect you to give it a fair and unbiased review. Henson nodded, the humility evident in his eyes. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your honesty, and I'll make sure that her application is reconsidered properly. With that, Robert stood, signaling the end of their conversation. Henson rose as well, his expression respectful, and extended a hand. Thank you, Robert. I'll ensure that we learn from this. As Henson left the office, Robert sat back down, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. He had stood up for his daughter, yes, but more importantly, he had taken a stand for the principles he believed in. And as he looked out over the city skyline, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that his position was not just a title, but a platform to create lasting change. The days following Robert's meeting with Mr. Henson were filled with an uncharacteristic energy, a buzz of tension and expectation that seemed to linger in the halls of the bank. For those accustomed to routine and stability, the change was palpable, though few knew the true reason behind it. It was as though a quiet storm had settled over the institution, its presence subtle but undeniable. The news of Robert's conversation with Henson had spread in whispers, each retelling slightly different but all pointing to the same theme. Something fundamental was shifting. In the break rooms and corridors, conversations about inclusivity and fairness cropped up with surprising frequency. For some employees, it was the first time they'd truly reflected on the experiences of their colleagues who didn't fit the traditional mold of the financial world. They spoke in lowered voices, their tone alternating between curiosity and discomfort as they grappled with the reality that had, until now, remained largely unseen. One such conversation took place in the quiet corner of the cafeteria, where a group of junior associates gathered during lunch. Laura, a young analyst fresh out of college, hesitated before voicing her thoughts. "Did you hear about what happened with Mr. Henson?" she asked, her eyes darting around as if expecting someone to overhear. James, a fellow analyst who had joined the bank only a year prior, nodded. "Yeah, I heard something about it. Apparently, he mishandled a loan application, and Mr. Ellison wasn't too happy about it. But that happens all the time, doesn't it?" Laura frowned, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe, but from what I heard, this was different. It wasn't just a mistake. There was prejudice involved. The others fell silent, processing her words. For many of them, discussions of race and bias were new, uncomfortable topics. The financial world often prided itself on being colorblind, a place where numbers and results mattered more than identities. But as Laura's words hung in the air, they were reminded that reality was rarely so simple. "I guess I never thought about it that way," James admitted, looking down at his sandwich. "I always assumed that everyone gets treated the same here. I mean, it's a bank. We're supposed to be objective." Another associate, Malik, spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "That's the thing, though. Objectivity doesn't mean ignoring who someone is. Sometimes, pretending not to see color just means we're ignoring the biases that are already there." Mr. Ellison stood up because someone treated his daughter unfairly, and he wanted to make it right. "We should be talking about this." The group fell silent again, each of them absorbing Malik's words. The reality of Robert Ellison's influence and his stand against bias was settling over them in a way that made them question their own assumptions. And as the conversation continued, it became clear that this was just one of many discussions sparked by Robert's actions. Meanwhile, in the upper levels of the bank's administration, the effects of Robert's stand were equally profound. The boardroom, once a place of routine financial discussions and policy meetings, had become the site of deeper, more uncomfortable conversations. Senior executives who had previously seen inclusivity as a check-the-box requirement found themselves questioning their own practices, examining the subtle ways in which bias might have seeped into the institution's very foundation. During a particularly tense board meeting, Robert sat at the head of the table, his calm demeanor belying the intensity of his words. He had prepared for this moment, knowing that it was an opportunity to address the very culture of the bank, a culture that had allowed his daughter's experience to happen. "We can't afford to ignore these issues any longer," he said, his voice firm but measured. "If we're truly committed to being a fair and inclusive institution, we need to look at our policies, our training, and our hiring practices. We can't just assume that because we don't see the problem, it doesn't exist." Some of his colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly uneasy with the direction of the conversation. To many of them, Robert's words felt like a call to accountability, a reminder that their leadership roles came with responsibilities that extended beyond the balance sheets. One board member, Mr. Thompson, raised a hand. "Robert, I understand your concerns, and I respect your dedication to fairness. But isn't it enough that we have policies in place? We've made efforts to recruit a diverse workforce. We offer workshops on inclusivity. Surely, we're already doing our part." Robert met Mr. Thompson's gaze, his expression unyielding. "Policies are only as effective as the people who enforce them. If we're not addressing the biases that affect decision-making, then all the policies in the world won't change a thing. This isn't just about hiring diversity, it's about creating an environment where everyone is truly valued and treated fairly. That's the kind of bank we should strive to be." The room fell silent, his words settling heavily over the table. It was a challenge, a call to action that required them to confront uncomfortable truths. And as the meeting concluded, Robert could see that his message had resonated, even if it would take time for real change to unfold. Back at her apartment, Nia followed the developments with a mixture of pride and apprehension. When she had first told her father about her experience, she hadn't expected him to take such a bold stand. She knew him as a man of principle, someone who believed in justice and fairness, but she also understood the pressures he faced as one of the few Black executives in the industry. Taking a stand against bias wasn't just a professional risk for him, it was a deeply personal one. For days, she felt torn between gratitude for her father's support and a lingering sense of unease. Part of her feared that his actions might make him a target, that the colleagues who had once respected him might now see him as a troublemaker for disrupting the status quo. And yet, as she watched the ripple effects of his actions spread throughout the bank, she began to feel something she hadn't felt since her loan application was first rejected: hope. One evening, she sat down with her laptop, opening her business proposal for the first time since the loan rejection. She had poured her heart into this plan, crafting each section with the care and dedication that had defined her work ethic since childhood. In her mind, It was more than just a business venture. It was a chance to make a difference, to create a company that would reflect the values her father had instilled in her. As she read through her proposal, a new sense of determination welled up within her. Her father's actions had reminded her of the power of resilience, of the importance of standing up for oneself in the face of adversity. And as she reviewed her business plan, she made a silent promise to herself. She would pursue her dream, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. The next day, Nia reached out to a different bank, determined to find a lender who would evaluate her application fairly. She was prepared for rejection, but this time, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. Her father's support, coupled with her own resolve, had given her the strength to keep moving forward. Meanwhile, back at the bank, the conversations sparked by Robert's stand continued to grow. HR began implementing new training programs, focusing not just on diversity, but on the importance of empathy and understanding in financial decision-making. Managers were encouraged to have open dialogues with their teams, addressing issues of bias and discussing ways to create a more inclusive environment. Robert watched these changes unfold with a sense of quiet satisfaction. He knew that true transformation would take time, that the biases ingrained in the institution's culture wouldn't disappear overnight. But he also understood that every small step, every conversation, brought them closer to the kind of bank he had always envisioned, a place where fairness and integrity were more than just words, but values that shaped every decision. For Robert, the journey was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more conversations to have, but he was ready. He had taken a stand not just for his daughter, but for every person who had ever felt dismissed or overlooked. And as he walked through the bank's halls, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that leadership wasn't just about titles and responsibilities, it was about creating a legacy of change. As for Nia, her journey was just beginning. Armed with her father's support and her own unwavering resolve, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And in her heart, she knew that no matter what obstacles she encountered, she would continue to fight for her dreams, knowing that her father and the values he stood for were with her every step of the way. After her father's resolute stand, Nia found herself at a crossroads. The experience of being denied the loan had left her with a lingering sense of injustice, a reminder of how deeply systemic biases could affect even the most well-prepared, qualified individuals. Yet, with each conversation she shared with her father, each affirmation of her potential, a renewed sense of purpose began to take root. Robert's unwavering belief in her dreams and his commitment to challenging the biases within the bank had empowered her to push forward with her business aspirations, no matter the obstacles. Determined to turn this painful experience into a foundation for her ambitions, Nia poured herself into refining her business proposal. She analyzed the feedback she had received during her initial meetings with potential lenders and strengthened every section of her plan, making it more precise, impactful, and forward-thinking. She adjusted her projections, fine-tuned her target market analysis, and reworked her financial forecasts to align more closely with industry standards. Her proposal, once an impressive document, now glowed with clarity and precision. But Nia knew that these changes, however significant, weren't enough on their own. To stand out and succeed, she needed to prove her mettle not just on paper, but in action. Thus, she decided to test her ideas on a smaller scale, leveraging her savings and a small investment from a family friend to launch a pilot version of her business. This venture would be a proof of concept, a testament to her vision, and a chance to showcase her ability to lead and manage resources effectively. The business Nia envisioned was more than just a traditional company. It was a platform for empowerment. She wanted to create an organization that uplifted and championed underrepresented voices in the business world, providing mentorship, resources, and opportunities to aspiring entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. For her, it was about creating a legacy, not just for herself, but for the communities that often went unnoticed in the corporate world. In the months that followed, Nia dedicated herself to the pilot project with relentless energy. She worked long hours, splitting her time between developing marketing strategies, meeting with prospective clients, and managing the day-to-day operations of her small but growing team. Each challenge she faced, from budget constraints to unforeseen setbacks, tested her resilience and forced her to adapt, innovate, and persevere. But with each hurdle she overcame, her confidence grew, and so did her determination to see her vision through. Her efforts did not go unnoticed. Gradually, Nia's business began to gain traction. Word spread about the young entrepreneur with a powerful mission, and her client base started to expand as more people recognized the value she brought to the industry. Her story became a beacon of inspiration for other young entrepreneurs, especially women of color who had faced similar struggles in their pursuit of success. Through social media, Nia's journey reached an even broader audience, and she was soon invited to speak at events, share her insights on business panels, and even participate in mentorship programs for aspiring entrepreneurs from marginalized backgrounds. As her influence grew, Nia became a thought leader in her own right. Her experiences, both triumphant and challenging, offered valuable lessons to others who sought to break through the barriers of systemic bias. She spoke candidly about the obstacles she faced as a Black woman in business, unafraid to call out the inequities that often went unaddressed in the corporate world. Her voice, powerful and authentic, resonated with people who had felt sidelined or dismissed, inspiring them to pursue their own dreams with tenacity and courage. Meanwhile, Robert kept close tabs on his daughter's progress. He watched with pride as she built her business from the ground up, her resilience and ingenuity a testament to the values he had instilled in her. But he also knew that her journey highlighted a fundamental flaw in the banking industry, one that he was determined to address within his own institution. As a senior executive, Robert was uniquely positioned to implement changes that could help bridge the gap between the bank and the communities it served. He championed a series of new initiatives designed to support minority-owned businesses and underrepresented entrepreneurs, ensuring that they received fair consideration and access to resources. He worked closely with the bank's leadership team to create mentorship programs, funding opportunities, and partnerships with community organizations, aiming to break down the barriers that had prevented people like Nia from reaching their full potential. Robert also advocated for implicit bias training among the bank staff, encouraging them to examine their assumptions and consider the impact of their decisions on applicants from diverse backgrounds. He knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but he was committed to laying the foundation for a more inclusive, equitable banking environment. And with each new program, each policy shift, he felt that he was honoring his daughter's journey and the lessons it had taught him. As Nia's business continued to flourish, she began to attract the attention of potential investors. Her success had proven that her ideas were not only viable but transformative, and she soon found herself fielding inquiries from venture capitalists and angel investors who were eager to support her vision. However, Nia was selective in her choices, seeking partners who shared her commitment to social impact and who understood the deeper mission behind her work. For her, it wasn't just about growing her business. It was about building something that would make a lasting difference in the world. One day, to her surprise, she received an invitation from her father's bank. The email was from an executive she had met briefly during her initial loan application process, who had since learned about her business and the impact it was having. The bank was interested in exploring a potential partnership, one that would allow them to support minority-owned businesses in collaboration with her company. The opportunity was both thrilling and deeply symbolic, a testament to the change that her father's actions had set in motion. As she sat in the boardroom of her father's bank, preparing to present her business to a group of executives, Nia couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had come full circle, returning to the very institution that had once dismissed her. But this time, she was there as a leader, a successful entrepreneur with a proven track record and a vision for the future. Her presentation was met with enthusiasm, and the partnership discussions progressed quickly. The bank saw in Nia's company a way to expand its outreach and better serve its diverse clientele, while Nia recognized the opportunity to amplify her impact and provide even greater support to underrepresented entrepreneurs. Together, they laid the groundwork for a new initiative, a collaborative effort to provide funding, resources, and mentorship to small businesses led by individuals from marginalized communities. For Nia, this partnership was more than just a business opportunity. It was a victory, a testament to her resilience and her father's unwavering belief in her potential. She had turned her pain into purpose, transforming a moment of rejection into a powerful catalyst for change. And as she shook hands with the bank's executives, she knew that her journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, biases to dismantle, and opportunities to create. But with her father by her side and a growing network of supporters, she was ready to keep pushing forward, determined to make her mark on the world. As Robert watched his daughter stand confidently at the helm of her business, he felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond his role as a father or a banker. Together, they had not only overcome a moment of prejudice, they had ignited a movement, one that would inspire others to challenge the status quo and demand fairness and equality in every sphere of life. And as they left the bank that day, father and daughter side by side, they knew that they were part of something far greater than themselves, a legacy of resilience, determination, and change. The news of the bank's new partnership with Nia's company quickly spread through every floor of the corporate headquarters, sparking conversations in every department, from the executive suites to the customer service desks. For many employees, the partnership felt progressive and hopeful, signaling a new chapter for the institution. Others, however, approached the change with trepidation, uncomfortable with the implications it carried. The bank's internal communication team released an official statement highlighting the goals of the partnership: to foster diversity in small business funding, provide mentorship for underrepresented entrepreneurs, and bring fresh perspectives to financial practices. The message emphasized a commitment to equality and inclusion, values that Robert had been championing ever since Nia's initial encounter with the bank. He knew that such an alliance could be the first step toward a new era of fairness within the bank, and he was prepared to ensure that the values it represented would reach all levels of the organization. For some employees, especially those who had first-hand experience with discrimination, the partnership was a welcome and inspiring change. Natasha, a mid-level manager in the commercial loans division, felt a surge of pride upon hearing the news. As a woman of color, she had faced her own challenges within the corporate hierarchy, often feeling the unspoken but persistent biases that had shaped her interactions with both colleagues and clients. She had joined the bank with high hopes, only to find her ambitions curbed by a glass ceiling. However, seeing Nia, a young Black woman, being recognized and partnered with by the bank signaled to her that real progress was possible. Maybe they're finally listening, she thought, reflecting on the countless hours she'd spent advocating for diversity programs that often fell on deaf ears. For Natasha and her colleagues who had faced similar experiences, the partnership represented more than a business decision. It was a beacon of hope, a chance to redefine what was possible within the institution. She felt motivated to reach out to Nia, hoping to become involved in the mentorship initiative she was set to lead. Perhaps, through this partnership, she too could make a meaningful impact. In contrast, other employees met the announcement with skepticism. Alex, a loan officer with over a decade of experience at the bank, was one of those individuals. He prided himself on his professionalism and commitment to standard practices, believing that the bank's success had stemmed from its conservative, risk-averse approach. To him, the partnership with Nia's business felt like a deviation from what he considered traditional banking principles. "I just don't see why we need to make a big deal about it," Alex said one afternoon, chatting with his colleagues in the break room. "If her business is strong enough, it shouldn't need special treatment." His coworkers, some agreeing with his perspective and others cautiously silent, shared knowing glances. For Alex and those who thought like him, the bank's move seemed less like progress and more like a symbolic gesture, one that they felt risked diluting the institution's standards. His view, though unspoken in official conversations, was that partnerships should be based purely on financial criteria rather than social impact, a perspective he clung to despite the bank's clear shift in direction. Meanwhile, Robert remained vigilant, aware of the variety of responses the partnership would provoke. He scheduled a series of workshops and town hall meetings to open up discussions across departments. At these gatherings, he invited employees to voice their questions, concerns, and suggestions about the new direction, hoping to foster transparency and encourage buy-in. Robert also took the opportunity to emphasize the broader vision behind the partnership, one that extended beyond business as usual. He explained that by supporting Mia's venture, the bank could both expand its market reach and address inequities that had persisted for far too long. One memorable town hall session included a presentation from Mia herself, who spoke candidly about her journey as a Black woman in business, the biases she encountered, and her vision for her company and the partnership. Her words were both powerful and personal, resonating deeply with employees across the board. She spoke of her struggles and triumphs, her dedication to helping other marginalized entrepreneurs, and her hope that her collaboration with the bank would create lasting change. For many in the audience, her story was a revelation, an eye-opening reminder of the real-world implications of the policies they enforced every day. Following Mia's presentation, hands shot up in the audience. Questions poured in, with employees expressing genuine interest in her work and the impact it was having. One young analyst asked how Mia planned to support entrepreneurs who faced similar challenges to hers, while another employee from the risk management department inquired about the financial safeguards she'd implemented in her own business model. Mia's answers were thoughtful and detailed, showcasing her strategic acumen and the depth of her commitment to her mission. Her responses left a lasting impression on the attendees, challenging their assumptions and encouraging them to consider how their roles within the bank could support the partnership's goals. As more employees began to embrace the initiative, the bank saw a gradual shift in its internal culture. Managers initiated team discussions on implicit bias, and diversity training sessions became more robust, incorporating case studies and real-life scenarios inspired by Mia's journey. The impact of the partnership also extended beyond the bank's walls. Several community organizations reached out, expressing interest in collaborating with the bank on similar initiatives to support minority-owned businesses. The bank's decision to partner with Mia's company had set off a chain reaction, inspiring other institutions to take similar steps toward greater inclusivity in their own practices. But change did not come without challenges. Some board members were vocal in their concerns, particularly regarding the financial risk associated with the partnership. During a high-stakes board meeting, Robert found himself defending the decision to skeptical investors who questioned the partnership's long-term profitability. One board member, a staunch advocate for conservative investment, voiced his doubts openly. "Robert, I understand the sentiment here, but we're a bank, not a charity. How can we be sure that this partnership won't compromise our bottom line?" Robert responded with patience, emphasizing the strategic benefits of the partnership. He explained that by supporting diverse entrepreneurs, the bank was tapping into an underserved market, which presented both social and financial potential. He backed his argument with data on the growing success rates of minority-owned businesses and highlighted studies showing that companies with diverse partnerships often outperform their peers. His argument, rooted in both ethical and financial logic, helped to assuage some concerns, though he knew that certain board members would remain cautious. Over time, the bank began to see tangible benefits from the partnership. Mia's business brought in a new segment of clients, many of whom had previously struggled to access financial services. These clients, inspired by Mia's story and her company's mission, became loyal customers of the bank as well. As the bank's customer base diversified, so did its portfolio, with new products and services tailored to meet the unique needs of minority-owned businesses. The partnership proved to be not only a powerful social initiative, but also a profitable venture, validating Robert's vision and challenging the doubts of even the most skeptical stakeholders. As the bank's commitment to inclusion deepened, its reputation in the community flourished. Mia's company became a symbol of change, inspiring other financial institutions to consider similar partnerships and elevating the bank's standing as a leader in social responsibility. Employees took pride in the institution's evolving culture, and many began to feel a renewed sense of purpose in their roles. For those who had once questioned the partnership, the success of the initiative offered a valuable lesson in the power of resilience, vision, and the impact that a single decision could have on an entire industry. Through this journey, Robert and Mia remained close allies, celebrating each milestone and strategizing together to address the challenges that arose along the way. Their partnership, both familial and professional, became a testament to the possibilities that could emerge when personal experiences intersected with professional missions. Together, they had not only created a successful business alliance, but had sparked a movement, one that would ripple through the bank and the broader business community for years to come. This transformation became a defining moment for the bank and an inspiring chapter in Nia's life, a story of perseverance, partnership, and the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter who dared to challenge the status quo. In the months following the partnership's launch, Nia's company and the bank experienced unprecedented growth, but the effects of their alliance extended far beyond the financial. For Nia, it had always been about more than simply expanding her business. She saw this partnership as an opportunity to advocate for social change and to open doors for others. The bank, in turn, began to recognize how impactful an inclusive approach could be, not only as a business strategy, but as a way to transform its very identity. As the partnership continued to thrive, the bank undertook several initiatives to institutionalize the values that had inspired the alliance with Nia's company. Robert spearheaded a major policy review, focusing on areas like loan approvals, customer service, and employee diversity. His goal was clear: to identify areas where biases, whether conscious or unconscious, might have previously shaped outcomes. Together with Nia, he created a special task force to address these issues head-on, gathering representatives from every department within the bank. The task force met regularly, reviewing case studies and analyzing data on past loan applications, credit policies, and customer interactions. They began to implement comprehensive diversity and inclusion training aimed at cultivating awareness and empathy among all employees. In the sessions, employees learned not only about overt discrimination but also about subtler forms of bias that could influence decision-making. For many staff members, these workshops provided a meaningful opportunity for self-reflection and growth, while also fostering a stronger sense of unity and shared purpose within the company. In one notable training session, employees reviewed a real-life scenario inspired by Nia's initial experience, detailing a loan application from a minority-owned business that had been unfairly rejected due to the applicant's background. As employees discussed the case, many of them were moved to reconsider the impact of their own decisions, reflecting on how personal assumptions might shape their interactions with clients. For Nia, witnessing these conversations unfold was both rewarding and emotional. It affirmed her belief that change was possible and that the bank, an institution that had once limited her, was now willing to learn from its past mistakes and evolve. The ripple effects of these initiatives were felt throughout the organization. The bank's hiring practices also began to shift, with an emphasis on recruiting employees from diverse backgrounds. Under Robert's leadership, the bank launched a scholarship program aimed at supporting young talent from underrepresented communities who aspired to careers in finance. Nia became a mentor for the scholarship recipients, guiding them as they pursued their dreams and providing them with insights from her own experiences. Her mentorship not only inspired the next generation of financial leaders, but also helped these young individuals see that they had a place in an industry that had traditionally excluded them. One of Nia's mentors, a young woman named Tasha, quickly became a rising star within the bank's internship program. Like Nia, she had encountered her fair share of obstacles on the path to success. Through their conversations, Nia shared the hard-won lessons she had learned along the way, encouraging Tasha to persevere and reminding her that she was capable of overcoming any challenge. Inspired by Nia's guidance, Tasha excelled in her role, gaining recognition for her innovative ideas and her dedication to creating a more inclusive banking system. Her journey echoed Nia's own, and soon, Tasha became a role model for others within the organization. As Nia's influence grew, so did her vision for change. She expanded her business's scope to include consulting services for other minority-owned enterprises, offering them insights on navigating the banking world and securing funding. Her company hosted workshops on financial literacy, teaching budding entrepreneurs how to manage their finances, prepare for loan applications, and advocate for their needs. Nia's work brought her into contact with dozens of other entrepreneurs, each with their own unique story and set of challenges. Through these interactions, She built a supportive network of business owners who encouraged one another, celebrated each other's successes, and collaborated on initiatives that promoted economic empowerment. Recognizing the value of this network, Nia established a formal coalition of minority-owned businesses, an organization dedicated to fostering collaboration and advocating for fair treatment in the financial sector. The coalition quickly gained traction, attracting members from various industries and capturing the attention of national advocacy groups. Together, the coalition members worked to hold financial institutions accountable, pushing for policy changes that would benefit underrepresented business owners. They met with lawmakers, hosted public forums, and published reports on the obstacles minority entrepreneurs faced when seeking funding. The coalition's work brought national awareness to the issue, sparking conversations within the financial industry about the need for more equitable practices. Meanwhile, Robert continued to drive change within the bank, building on the successes of the partnership with Nia's company. He secured support from the board to launch a new program aimed at investing in minority-owned businesses, with the goal of bridging the gap in funding opportunities. The program provided not only financial support but also mentorship, networking opportunities, and access to resources that would help these businesses thrive. Over time, the program became a cornerstone of the bank's identity, and it garnered widespread recognition for its impact on the community. In addition to his work with the bank, Robert became a public advocate for diversity in finance, sharing his insights at conferences and industry events. His speeches often highlighted the story of his daughter's journey and the lessons he had learned from her. For Robert, the experience had been transformative, both as a leader and as a father. He felt an immense sense of pride in Nia's accomplishments, and he was deeply moved by the ways in which their partnership had reshaped the bank and the lives of countless individuals. His story, once shared among colleagues, became an example of how personal connections could drive meaningful change in even the most established institutions. For Nia, the journey had also brought her closer to her father. She knew that her achievements would not have been possible without his support, and she was grateful for the opportunity to work alongside him. They had started as a family with a shared vision, and now they were partners in a movement that was transforming an entire industry. Their bond grew stronger with each milestone they reached, and they often reflected together on the journey that had brought them to this point. As the years passed, Nia's business continued to flourish, and her influence extended far beyond the walls of the bank. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her insights at universities, business conferences, and community events. She inspired young entrepreneurs to pursue their dreams, and she encouraged established business leaders to consider how their actions could create a more inclusive economy. Nia's legacy grew, and her work left an indelible mark on the industry she had once struggled to break into. Back at the bank, the partnership with Nia's company became a celebrated part of the institution's history. Employees spoke of it with pride, viewing it as a turning point in the bank's evolution. The bank's reputation had been transformed, and its commitment to diversity became a central pillar of its identity. Clients and partners alike saw the bank as a leader in social responsibility, and its influence extended far beyond its financial success. In her personal life, Nia felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had achieved her dreams, but she had also created a path for others to follow. She knew that the journey was far from over, and she remained dedicated to her mission of empowerment and advocacy. For Nia, success was not defined by her own accomplishments alone. It was measured by the impact she had on others and the change she inspired within the industry. Looking back on her journey, Nia often thought about that first day at the bank, when she had been judged unfairly and dismissed without a second thought. She knew that the obstacles she had faced had only made her stronger, and she was proud of the legacy she had built. Her story was one of resilience, courage, and the power of family. And as she continued her work, she carried with her the knowledge that she had not only changed her own life, but had also paved the way for a brighter future for countless others.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.